joined together of the high seas, specifically through a new UN high seas treaty. We were thrilled to participate in last year's Paris Peace Forum and to be one of 10 projects selected as a scale-up project, and especially receive the invaluable support and mentoring from the Paris Peace Forum Scale-Up Committee. So what if I told you that the biggest transformative opportunity in decades to safeguard 2/3 of the world's oceans is happening right now? And beyond those of you watching this now and those involved in the negotiations and ocean policy wonks, nearly no one even knows about it. For the past 15 years, government representatives have been gathering in basement rooms just like this one at the United Nations late until the night to find a way forward on protecting areas beyond national jurisdiction through a new UN treaty. So today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about this story, where we are in the negotiations and next steps. But first, let's take a few steps back. So what exactly are the high seas and why are they important? Why should we care? Some say they are the forgotten half of our planet. They are Earth's biggest biosphere, making up nearly 2/3 of the world's oceans and almost half the surface area of our planet. So on this map, you can see the pale blue areas. Those are the high seas that take up most of the ocean. The smaller, darker blue areas are the areas within exclusive economic zones. And because this is the ocean area beyond national jurisdiction, they are a true global common shared by everyone and belonging to no one nation. Essentially, the high seas begin where national oversight of the ocean ends, and therein lies the problem. The high seas are a vast expanse and full of life where great whales and sharks and tuna migrate about its byways, with underwater mountain chains that span the areas and play host to a diversity of marine life, species that we are only now beginning to understand, and much still remains undiscovered. In fact, we know less about the deep sea than the surface of the moon. We may never be fortunate to see these wonders of the ocean ourselves unless we're someone like Dr. Sylvia Earle, who goes down in a submersible. But we all depend on the high seas, and they are in trouble. In fact, we are in the midst of unprecedented threats to the ocean from human activities. In the span of just 100 years, we have managed to do quite a bit of damage to what has existed for a millennia. There are still pirate fishermen by the thousands and too little enforcement on ungoverned ocean spaces. For example, nearly 90% of the world's marine fish stocks are now fully exploited, overexploited, or depleted. There are plastic patches floating in the Pacific the size of small countries, and climate change-induced ocean warming and acidification is decimating coral reefs and further exacerbating these human impacts on the ocean ecosystems. And to add to that, deep seabed mining is a looming reality. And it is hard to predict what unforetold and emerging issues lie in the ocean's future. So perhaps at this point you're thinking, well, surely there are rules to prevent a free-for-all in our shared ocean space. Why would just a few countries be able to exploit and damage resources that belong to all of us? Well, that's exactly what is taking place. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, is the legal framework for all activities in the ocean. In essence, it's the constitution for the ocean. However, it was negotiated in the 1970s at a time when technology to go deeper and farther into the ocean wasn't really foreseen, and it has serious gaps. Under this convention, there's no overarching oversight of all activities in the high seas. Instead, various activities are governed by a patchwork of international, regional, and sectoral agreements and organizations with different priorities. For instance, the IMO governs shipping, the International Seabed Authority governs deep seabed mining, regional fishery management organizations govern fishing and catch allowances on specific types of fish, and there are a multitude of multilateral environmental agreements. In some areas, mandates overlap and create complicated jurisdictional issues, and elsewhere there are gaps where no one has the full authority to act. As a result, in the high seas, human activities are weakly regulated and poorly enforced or not regulated at all. Currently, only around 1% of the high seas are fully protected, though scientists and many countries, including France, are urging 30% protection by 2030 as the minimum needed to safeguard biodiversity, avoid collapse of fisheries, as well as bolster the ocean's resilience to climate change. In the United States, the creation of the National Park Service remains to this day one of the most forward-thinking and progressive conservation programs ever created. And we now have 12% land areas because of that reserved as national parks. But we need to do the same thing now as we did on land, to create the Yellowstones and the Yosemites of the ocean to allow our special ocean habitats to thrive. So what exactly does the ocean do for us? Well, of course, we all enjoy relaxing at the beach and swimming in the waves, but it has a transformative impact on our ability to live on the planet. In addition to regulating our climate, the ocean absorbs 90% of excess heat from global warming and provides the oxygen for every second breath we take. It supports a $500 billion global economy and livelihoods of 12% of the world's population. Over 1 billion people count on fish as a source of protein. And while we certainly know biodiversity has an intrinsic value in and of its own, ocean protection makes good economic sense too. And the science is clear. These days, it seems we can't open the paper without hearing new reports about the ocean and climate crisis. We now know that the ocean is severely depleted, and we can't claim otherwise to future generations. This is on our watch. Numerous high-level UN reports have been released that highlight the need for transformative change in the way we manage our biodiversity and ocean to address these impacts. In 2019, the esteemed Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued a special report that highlights the urgency of prioritizing ambitious action to address unprecedented and enduring changes in the ocean and cryosphere. And the IPBES report on biodiversity and ecosystem services states that the rate of species extinction across all sectors, including the ocean, is already at least 10 to hundreds of times higher than the average rate over the past 10 million years and is accelerating. Think about it. These are recommendations not from one or two scientists, but from hundreds of the world's most respected climate and marine scientists warning us to act before it is too late. It's vital that we listen to the science, to what eminent marine biologists are telling us unequivocally, that it is time for action to repair our ocean if we want it to continue to provide us with the services that make our beautiful blue planet habitable. But all is not lost, because we do have a way forward. As I mentioned at the outset, governments and ocean advocates have been discussing these issues for over 15 years at the United Nations headquarters in New York and in capitals all around the world. These discussions initially began in 2002 and evolved to 2018, where formal UN treaty negotiations were launched for a new legally binding treaty for the conservation and sustainable use of marine life in areas beyond national jurisdiction, the high seas. This is the first time in nearly 40 years that world governments have gathered to negotiate a global treaty related to the ocean, and the first ever to address biodiversity in the high seas, to finally put this global resource under global protection. That makes good sense, right? This treaty could provide a framework for the establishment of a network of well-connected and representative marine protected areas on the high seas, which could allow the ocean to repair and build resilience in the midst of so many other stressors. It could also operationalize a process for conducting environmental impact assessments for all activities that may have a significant effect on marine life. And because these are shared international waters, this is the only effective way to do this, through a global UN treaty. After 3 rounds of negotiations at the United Nations, they are in the final stage, and we now have draft treaty text on the table. The 4th and final slated session had been scheduled for late March 2020, but had to be postponed due to COVID-19, but will be rescheduled at the earliest date in 2021. This brings us to critical questions that are being discussed among government delegations. What will be a successful outcome of the 4th and final slated session? Will we be able to make sufficient progress in this extended intersessional period so that when governments do meet again at the 4th negotiating session, an agreement can be reached? All options are still on the table regarding the current draft treaty, but it remains to be seen whether this agreement will move us beyond the current status quo. This will greatly depend upon states' ambition and political will. With new and emerging threats facing the ocean every single day, It's critical that we maintain the momentum and heighten ambition to reach agreement as soon as possible, since after the treaty is adopted, additional time will be needed for countries to ratify and implement the treaty. So we've come to the cliffhanger of our tale about a treaty. How will our story end? Whether or not we will be applauding the adoption of an ambitious treaty in the coming year depends on all of us. This is our ocean. We are all stakeholders and have a critical role to play, whether governments, ocean advocates, scientists, and citizens. We need all voices to bring this treaty over the finish line so that we can protect this forgotten half of our planet. It's taken nearly 2 decades to get to this point, and the opportunity will not come again in our lifetimes. This is what we are fighting for. Now more than ever, the global pandemic we are facing only reinforces how connected we are to each other and to nature. To ignore nature's plea to us is really to do so at our own peril. The ocean and nature will surely continue without us, but we cannot thrive without it. Merci beaucoup, and I thank you so much for your interest today, and we are so very grateful to the Paris Peace Forum and their generous support and advice over the past year. I'd be happy to address some questions that I think will be coming this way. Thank you. All right, I see. The question I see is, how has the COVID-19 crisis affected the project? Have you found the environmental issues to have been set aside during the pandemic? Well, I think like everyone on this planet right now, it has certainly affected the negotiations. I think, as I mentioned during the presentation, we were slated to have the 4th negotiating session back last March and April. And because of COVID, they've now been postponed until an unknown time in 2021. We hope that they will take place the first half of 2021, but that's still yet to be seen. And certainly we're all waiting to see what happens here in New York, because one of the issues is that the negotiations will take place in New York, and as most know, the United States is not in a good situation regarding the COVID crisis right now. So until there's a time frame when government delegations can travel without quarantine and people can meet, certainly that is one issue. However, the good news is that intersessional work has moved forward. Ambassador Rina Lee from Singapore, who resides as the president of the conference, has initiated a program of work. And it's quite creative. It's an online program, and it began in September. And each month, the facilitators of each of the elements of the treaty, and there are 4 elements and then cross-cutting issues. The 4 elements are area-based management tools, including MPAs, environmental impact assessments, marine genetic resources, and the questions around sharing of benefits, and capacity building and marine technology transfer, and then a host of cross-cutting issues that involve institutional arrangements, funding, compliance, dispute settlement. So while there are 4 package elements, these are the 5. There's really 5 packages of issue, a 5-package issue, and each month the online session addresses some questions surrounding one of those elements. We've had 2 sessions so far, and are looking to are in the midst of the area-based management tool session right now. So that allows delegations to put online submissions on their thoughts on proposals, and President Lee is very much encouraging bilateral discussions behind the scenes. In addition, the High Seas Alliance has partnered with the Norwegian Nobel Institute, Belgium, Costa Rica, and Monaco for a series of high seas dialogues that are done virtually through video conferencing with government delegations, again on the same suite of issues that follow up on the online program. And so it's been wonderful to see the interest, and there has been real interest by all delegations to continue this work. But we do know that we cannot adopt a treaty until we can meet again and governments can have those face-to-face negotiations. So the good news, yes, there is progress, work is being done, but we would urge that we conclude these negotiations when we can meet again at IGC for the fourth session. We've been having these discussions for so long now, and so it's crucial to get as much work done in the intersessional period, so that when we finally can come to the table in person at the IGC4, we can conclude the negotiations. But that will take political will. As I also mentioned, there are much of the critical issues are in brackets. All the critical issues are in brackets, in fact. That means that they haven't. I think I lost my connection for a moment. I'm back if I can be heard. So I think wonderful. Okay, sorry about that. It's out of my control. So the next question is, how do countries feel about the initiative? Are there some key countries which will not likely join the initiative? Well, I will say all member states have been involved in the discussions at the United Nations, and all agreed during the PrepCom, the conclusion of a preparatory committee at the end of 2017, to move forward with the negotiations. So all countries are on board, and we are very hopeful that this will be a treaty that gets wide ratification. Let's see. Yeah, so I would say, from the beginning, there have been groupings of very ambitious countries, and the European Union has been one of the key regions that first took the initiative to for the need for this treaty to move forward. And there have been other regional groupings that have been very ambitious in their work and the proposals from a conservation standpoint, including the African group, the Pacific small islands, the Caribbean, Latin America. I would say all the regions really are very much championing the need to move forward with these negotiations and have an agreement that goes beyond the status quo. There are always some nations who are perhaps more concerned and maybe have more difficulty regarding differences in marine genetic resources. But we're hopeful that we'll be able to bring the less ambitious countries along, but there will be compromises to be made. Let's see. Will the treaty have economic consequences for states? Certainly, and that is a concern for developing countries in particular, and that's why one of the elements of the treaty, capacity building and marine technology transfer, is so important, because in order for all states to operationalize the treaty once it's adopted and ratified they'll have to go through adoption of their own regulations in their own nations, and part of that will have some cost to that, but the capacity building is one of the mechanisms that we hope will assist developing countries in fulfilling their obligations under the treaty. One of the elements that is very much has not had a lot of discussion to date is a funding mechanism for the treaty, and how will the treaty be funded? And this is very much a discussion that is really just starting to begin, and so that will be critical as well. What marine species are particularly endangered because of the lack of protection of the high seas? Well, I mean, I mean, beyond national jurisdiction, the deep sea, there's so much that we still don't know. Even the most eminent marine biologists tell us there's so much undiscovered marine life and perhaps future cures for diseases that lie in even small microorganisms. But certainly, fisheries are one of the issue that are one of the biggest problems of areas beyond national jurisdiction. Overfishing, exploited fishing, and there's extreme ecosystems of hydrothermal vents and a broad swath of so many very rare and unique species that we still don't even know that exist. But certainly the marine life in over half the planet, 2/3 of our ocean, is at stake. And we need to have some types of regulation in place to be able to protect it for our future generations. What is currently happening in the high seas in the absence of a treaty? Well, from our view, it's relatively a free-for-all. As I said, right now there's no overarching mechanisms that can coordinate all the various activities and stresses that are taking place. There's regional fishery management organizations have oversight over fishing, but that's only on specific species or in specific areas, and there are many areas that aren't covered by RFMOs. So there's no oversight in those areas. And then in addition to that, there's the shipping is monitored by the International Maritime Organization. There's a broad overlap and of all kinds of mandates, and there's just not one harmonization of all these different regional and sectoral organizations. And so that's really leading to a lack of any kind of regulation for most of the activities that take place. And what really concerns us is that we still don't know what future and emerging activities may take place down the road. Those are still to be seen, and there's new geoengineering capabilities happening every day, and we need to have a way to be able to have environmental impact assessments done for any type of activity that may have an effect in areas beyond national jurisdiction, and to be able to stop an activity that takes place, that may take place that may have that effect as well. But this has to be under the global decision, because we can't leave decisions to individual countries that may affect every single one of us. These are a shared global common. Is the adoption of the treaty enough? Will it result in any practical changes? Well, yes, it's certainly, well, is it enough? Well, that remains to be seen. There will always be more to do, but it's the first start that's vitally needed. One of the points that I discussed in my presentation is that right now there is no way to provide for to establish a marine protected area in the high seas. There's been a very small number done around the world after years and years of effort, particularly in Camelar. But it takes, since these are a global body, since these are a global, these are the global community, and these are the high seas for all of us. There's no one nation cannot decide, well, we'll create an MPA in this area. So we have to have the world governments come together to create marine protected areas and a representative network of marine protected areas. Key scientists and many countries are now calling for the need for at least 30% protected areas in the high seas, in the global ocean. And the only way to be able to do that would be to have a treaty that could also establish a mechanism and a framework to create those MPAs in the high seas. So, well, we'd been a scale-up project of the Paris. The question is, how do you hope this edition of the Paris Peace Forum will support the work of your project or support your work. So we have had the benefit of the Paris Peace Forum Scale-Up team. And actually I want to thank Felix Fernandez-Shaw and Alexander Stutzman, who are our mentors over the year, and as well as many on the Paris Peace Forum organizing team who have helped us and really provided us with wonderful opportunities in connecting us with the opportunity for work in the European Union and in France. And we've really felt the support by France on our issues from the past year and going forward. We know that France is strongly in support of establishing an ambitious and robust treaty in 2021. And there was a high-level panel actually yesterday with many thanks to the Paris Peace Forum because they really worked behind the scenes to put an excellent panel forward. And on that panel, moderated by former Costa Rican President Jose Maria Figueres, was the European Commissioner Virginia Sinkevicius, and the French Minister of the Sea, Annick Girardin, who spoke about the ambition and the need to bring this treaty over the finish line by the final IGC4. So we're very excited and know that they are behind us at the highest levels. So the support from the Paris Peace Forum over the past year has been instrumental in raising the profile and getting the political will that we need at this point. That's the most, at this point over the difficult issues, it comes down to political will. We've had so many discussions over the past 20 years. We know what the sticking points are. It's now for the leaders, world leaders, to come behind this treaty and say, it's time, let's make the decisions that we need to get this treaty adopted and make a change for our ocean for many generations to come. So thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to speak to you all here today. Do I feel the high-level debate contributed a bit to our objectives? Absolutely. The high-level debate, meaning the high-level event yesterday? It's unclear. But yes, I think the panel yesterday was wonderful to hear not only Minister Girardin and Commissioner Sinkevicius, but Sir Richard Branson, who represents industry, and President Rena Lee were on the panel, and to see how important and raising the profile of how important these discussions really are. And we need more discussions like that. We need more world leaders to come on board like that. And that's really what is needed to get us over the finish line and to make those difficult decisions. Thank you so much.